The tale begins in the winter of 1997 in the remote town of Ashwood Grove, nestled deep in the northern reaches of Vermont. The town, nearly forgotten by modern maps, was accessible only by a winding road flanked by towering pine forests that seemed to breathe in the bitter December wind. Ashwood Grove was a place where tradition outweighed progress, and where every stone and tree whispered echoes of a distant past. I had come to Ashwood Grove as part of a historical research project. My name is Michael Grant, a folklorist from Boston University, and I was tasked with documenting oral histories of New England's isolated communities. I'd heard rumors of Ashwood Grove's peculiar holiday customs, remnants of older, darker traditions that predated Christianity. This was not merely an academic pursuit. I had a personal fascination with how folklore survives in pockets of isolation. Yet, I had no idea the cost that fascination would bring. I arrived on December 18th, just as snow began to fall in thick, silencing sheets. I was greeted by Miriam Harker, an elderly woman who ran a small bed and breakfast out of a converted Victorian house at the edge of the woods. Her smile was warm, but her eyes held a guarded intensity that unsettled me. "We don't get many visitors this time of year," Miriam said, as she handed me an old-fashioned brass key to my room. "People prefer the comforts of the city, I suppose." "I've come to learn about the history of Ashwood Grove," I said, watching her expression closely. "I'm particularly interested in the origins of your winter festivals." Her smile faded slightly. "You'll find the truth here is buried under layers of time and snow, Mr. Grant. Some things are best left forgotten." Despite her warning, my curiosity burned hotter. The first 2 days passed quietly. I explored the frozen town, noting the way the old houses seemed to sag under the weight of time. Ashwood Grove had a population of just over 400, most of whom eyed me warily as I walked past. The center of the town was dominated by a stone circle, 10 rough-hewn monoliths standing in a perfect ring. The townsfolk referred to it as the Gathering Circle, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it watched me back as I took photographs. On December 20th, I met Jacob Langford, the town's unofficial historian, and an elderly man with a shock of white hair and eyes like faded denim. We sat by the fireplace in the local pub, the Brass Elk, as he recounted stories of Ashwood Grove's ancient rituals. "Before Christmas was Christmas," Jacob began. "It was Yule, a festival of the solstice. The old gods demanded offerings, and in return, they promised the sun's return." "What kind of offerings?" I asked, leaning in. "Sacrifices," Jacob said flatly. "Animals mostly. But there were darker times. I felt the air grow heavy around us. And what about the stone circle, the gathering circle?" Jacob's gaze shifted to the window, where snow now lashed against the panes. "That's where the midnight festival happens on the solstice. Only those who know the old ways are allowed to attend." "What happens at the festival?" I pressed. Jacob's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's a calling, an invitation to the spirits that never left these woods. You'll see for yourself if you stay up late enough." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the frost-encrusted window, Jacob's words repeating in my mind. At midnight, a distant humming began, low and rhythmic. It seemed to vibrate in my bones, pulling me from sleep like an unseen hand. I dressed quickly and stepped out into the cold, following the hum through the deserted streets until I reached the gathering circle. In the moonlight, I saw a gathering of townsfolk, all dressed in thick cloaks and holding lanterns that glowed like captive stars. Miriam was among them. her face painted with intricate runes. They chanted in an ancient tongue that sent chills down my spine, words I recognized from old texts but could not translate. The ceremony began as they lit a great bonfire at the center of the stone ring. The flames leaped high, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the snow. I watched, hidden behind a nearby tree, as they brought forward offerings, wreaths of holly, carved wooden idols, and bowls filled with dark, viscous liquid. But it was the last offering that made my breath catch in my throat. A young woman named Lila, whom I'd seen working at the town's bakery, was brought forth, her hands bound in front of her. Fear shone in her wide eyes, but she did not struggle. The chanting grew louder, almost a roar, as Miriam stepped forward holding a ceremonial dagger, its blade reflecting the fire's glow. Panic coursed through me, and I nearly stumbled forward, my mind screaming to stop what was happening. But something kept me rooted, an invisible force as powerful as it was malevolent. Spirits of the Ashwood, we offer this life in honor of the old pact, Miriam shouted, her voice echoing into the forest. As the blade descended, Lila's gaze turned upward, and I saw no fear in her eyes, only acceptance. Just before the knife struck, the wind picked up, swirling snow around the circle, obscuring my view. For a moment, all was still. When the snow cleared, Lila was gone. Not fallen, not lying in the snow, simply gone. The fire blazed higher, and the townsfolk began a slow, rhythmic dance, their bodies moving in eerie synchronicity. I backed away, my heart pounding, and ran back to the bed and breakfast. I locked the door and stayed awake until dawn, my mind reeling from what I had witnessed. The next morning, Miriam greeted me as if nothing had happened, her demeanor as calm as ever. I couldn't bring myself to confront her, fear of the unknown holding my tongue. On December 22nd, the atmosphere in Ashwood Grove shifted. The townsfolk seemed restless, their eyes darting nervously toward the forest. That evening, Jacob found me again at the Brass Elk, his expression grave. "You've seen too much," he said. "The Midnight Festival is only the beginning. Tomorrow, the hunt begins." "The hunt?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. Jacob leaned in close. "The spirits demand more than offerings. They demand the souls of those who witness but do not believe." That night, I packed my bags, intent on leaving. But as midnight approached, a deep, guttural howling echoed from the woods. It was not the cry of any animal I had ever heard, but a chorus of voices as if the forest itself had come alive. I ran for my car, snow crunching underfoot, but as I reached the edge of town, I saw them. Figures draped in shadow and mist, eyes glowing an unnatural white. They moved like specters, faster than any human could run. My headlights illuminated their faces, elongated, twisted, almost human but not quite. Panic seized me, and I turned back toward the town, only to see the villagers gathered at the edge of the forest, lanterns in hand. They watched, unmoved, as the figures closed in. Just as the first creature lunged, a blinding light engulfed me. I collapsed, the world spinning. When I woke, it was dawn, and I was lying in the snow, alone. My car was intact, my bags still packed in the back seat. The road that had been impassable now lay open before me. I fled without looking back. When I reported the events to the authorities, they found no trace of Ashwood Grove. The road I had taken led to an overgrown forest with no sign of human habitation. Years later, I still hear the howling on winter nights, a reminder that some places are best left forgotten, and that old gods never truly die. They wait, patient and eternal, for those foolish enough to seek them.